And while everyone's getting settled in, all the children, please come to the stage, and we'll have Mike is going to lead us in singing this morning. Here they come. All right.
Sing this morning? Okay. I'm all wrapped up, I'm all tied up, I'm all tangled up in Jesus. I'm all wrapped up, I'm all tied up, I'm all tangled up in God. I'm all wrapped up, I'm all tied up, I'm all tangled up in Jesus. I'm all wrapped up, tied up, tangled up in God. Oh yeah. I'm all wrapped up, tied up, tangled up in Jesus. I'm all wrapped up, tied up, tangled up in God. I'm all wrapped up, tied up, tangled up in Jesus. I'm all wrapped up, tied up, tangled up in God. Oh yeah. In this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine all the time. Let it shine, oh yeah. Hide it under a bushel, no, I'm gonna let it shine. Hide it under a bushel, no, I'm gonna let it shine. Hide it under a bushel, no, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine all the time. Let it shine, oh yeah. Won't let Satan get out. I'm gonna let it shine. Won't let Satan get out. I'm gonna let it shine. Won't let Satan get out. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine all the time. Let it shine. Oh yeah. Thank you.
Can I help you? Welcome to everyone, and another great day. Glad to see everyone. We have quite a few people. We have all of our youth and a group in Florida this morning, working with Hispanic congregations in that area with Carlos and Mary Bell, and so with that's I think that was turned out to be about 16 different young people that and parents and supervisors who went. So that's another great event for them. Welcome all you, and please remember to fill out your cards and pass those at the end of the aisle. And be sure if you're going to be here on Wednesday that you put down a number there so that we can have a close count of how many people are going to be here for that. But we kind of have a double special today. Mike Napier will be bringing our lessons today, this morning, and also this evening. And then last Wednesday evening, we had kind of a special event. And for all of our members, you already know what's going to happen here in a couple of seconds. We're going to be throwing a towel to Kayla Hollis, who was baptized on Wednesday night. And this is her servant towel for her. And she's threatened if I make a bad throw that she's not going to speak to me again. So we'll see if I can get it close anyway. And so after service today, if you can stay, we'll have the family service, a family service like we always do when we have a new baptism. Kayla?
Would you be standing, please? We praise thee, O God, for the Son of God, for Jesus who died and is now among us. Hallelujah, thine the glory. Hallelujah, amen. Hallelujah, thine the glory. Revive us again. special thought to the words in this song as we prepare our minds. 'Tis
I don't know how often as we sing songs of praise that we really pay close attention to what the verse says. The song that we sang just before this last one, when we talk about praise Him, praise Him, praise Him. That's what we're here for this morning. That's what we're here for every day. To not only sing praises to God and our Father, to Jesus our Christ, but to live that praise. If you notice, particularly in verse 2, it says, "For our sins He suffered and bled and died. He, our rock, our hope of eternal salvation. Hail Him, Jesus the crucified." We have a privilege each Sunday as we gather together to not only remember Him, that's what we should do every day, but it's also a celebration because He has gone before us, died on the cross that we might live and expect that eternal life if we honor Him in all that we do. 1 Corinthians, of course, you're familiar with 11:23, verse 11:23 through 26, where he's talking to his disciples.
And he's telling them, this is what I do. This is what our celebration is about. This is what this supper means to us. I'm about to die for the sins of the world. You know, that's not only in that, but there are other things I think we need to remember too. There's always a lesson for us to learn when we look at God's Word. In Matthew 26:28, Jesus actually proclaims his death for the sin of the world. Jesus said this, "This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sin." It's through him that we've been forgiven, through his blood. Luke 9:10, Jesus had a mission. We also need to remember his mission. Luke 19:10, "For the Son of Man came to seek and to save that which was lost." That's me. That's you. He came to save each of us. And then there's even another thing that we should remember, another lesson that we need to learn. Matthew 16:27, he's coming again. That's the day that we look forward to when he'll come again. Matthew 16:27, "For the Son of Man is going to come in his Father's glory with his angels. And then he will reward each person according to what they have done." Pay close attention to what he says. Also in Acts 1:11, Scripture says, "Men of Galilee, why do you stand there looking into the sky?" That's where he has shown. "This same Jesus who has been taken from you into heaven will come back in the same way you have seen him go into heaven." It's a glorious day that we look forward to. But without his death, his resurrection, his ascension, we would not have that hope. So this morning, as we partake of this communion, I hope that you will keep in mind the sacrifice that has been made for you and for me, that we might have the hope of an eternal life to come. Let's pray together. Father God, we offer up our prayer to you this day with thanksgiving. Thanksgiving for that Son that you sent here to teach, to help us to learn, and to make way for us to one day be with you. So as we partake of this bread this morning, Father, we remember his broken body, the struggle that he went through, the pains that he went through as he suffered, and then the cross where he died. Help us to partake of this emblem in a way that is pleasing to you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. I saw this done one time before, so I apologize. now we remember the sacrifice of the blood that was shed on the cross. Praying with me. Father, again, we come before you to thank you for the sacrifice, the giving of your one and only Son, that we might have the hope of eternal life. As we partake of this emblem, help us to remember the blood that was shed that gives us that cleansing of our sin. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. We are blessed people. We live in a blessed place. We have a blessed church that we have the privilege of attending. And through these blessings, the Bible tells us we're to share that of which we have been given. Not only the blessings of teaching the Word, but also the blessing of helping others in times of need. So this morning is the time we take up a collection for the support of the church, to support all of the activities, all the ministries that we have. The Bible also tells us to give freely and gladly. So this morning, as we give, pray we do that according to Him. Father, we have been blessed with every need that we have and even more. So this morning, help us to give freely in order that we can reach out all over the world and here in this local place to tell people about your Son, Jesus. Continue to bless us, Father. In His name we pray. Amen.
While we await the scripture reading this morning, if you would join me with singing and standing at this time, and we'll allow our Bible school, our youngsters who are going to the Bible hour to leave at this moment in preparation for their study. How shall the young secure their hearts and guard their lives from sin? Thy word the choicest rules impart, to keep the conscience clean, to keep the conscience clean. 'Tis like the sun, a heavenly light, that guides us all the day. And through the dangers of the night, a lamp to lead our way. A lamp to lead our way. My word is everlasting, our word is every day. That holy book shall guide our youth, and words will for our way. And rest upon our way.
Good morning, church. Today's reading is from the book of 2 Samuel, chapter 21, verses 10 through 12. Rizpah, daughter of Aiah, took sackcloth and spread it out for herself on a rock. From the beginning of the harvest till the rain poured down from the heavens on the bodies, she did not let the birds touch them by day or the wild animals by night. When David was told what Aiah's daughter Rizpah, Saul's concubine, had done, he went and took the bones of Saul and his son Jonathan from the citizens of Jabesh Gilead. They had stolen their bodies from the public square at Beth-shan, where the Philistines had hung them after they struck Saul down on Gilboa.
Good morning. What an unusual passage. I asked some of the men that I thought had a really good Bible knowledge if they knew anything about Rizpah. And they said no. The only one that knew, and it surprised me, was the brother that read the scripture, and he knew because he was reading the scripture. How many of you know much about Rizpah before you read this passage? Don, I'm not saying he's the one I asked and didn't know. Said, leave it to a preacher to find a tiny little verse and make a 45-minute sermon out of it. This is a tough passage, tough chapter. One of the things that convinces me that the Bible is the Word of God is that there are stories like this in there. Because if I were trying to fabricate something, I'm not sure that this is one of the stories that I would have left in there. This is tough stuff. One of the great challenges of faith is realizing that we are not going to understand everything about God. We are not going to. There's some things that I just don't get. But here's what I do get. 1 John 4:8. God is love. So everything I read in the Bible, I read in this context. that while I don't understand it, God is seeking our good, and God is seeking what's best in the big picture. One of the hard things to understand biblically, it's for the mature, not for those drinking milk, maybe, is that God has His expressed will, the things He says specifically that He's going to bring to pass, and He has His permissive will, where He allows things to happen. Now, the express will is pretty easy to accept. The permissive will, sometimes I'm scratching my head, saying I just don't understand. Well, that teaches me, I'll have a birthday tomorrow. I'll be older than a lot of you, but younger than a lot of you. Is that after all these years, there's some things I just don't understand, and I'm going to have to let God be God. We live in a society now and a culture among even some of our peoples that want to reject the Old Testament. Well, Paul said to the church at Corinth that the things were written before were written for our learning. So there's things we can learn from every incident, every circumstance. Now in 2 Samuel 21, starting verse 1, there had been famine for 3 years. Now we may think we know about famine, but we're talking famine. I means terrible things are happening, people do terrible things, and the people of God can't understand why. Basically, David says, God, finally, he thinks about this maybe after 3 years. God, what's going on? And God says, well, do you remember what your future previous king, did to the Gibeonites? And I'm sure he knew the story. You see, Joshua, this goes over generations. Joshua had made a commitment to the people of Gibeon, the Gibeonites, that they would not be killed. Now, the Gibeonites had been deceptive in getting this promise, but we're not going to deal with that today. And Saul, in his zeal, did not keep that covenant and killed them. And so the Lord said, and why all this time? The Gibeonites and what you did to them through Saul. What we do can impact generations. Generations. And so decades later, God is saying, it's time to answer for what you did to the Gibeonites. You've had plenty of time. He doesn't say this is my interpretation. You've had plenty of time to make this right. Because you know I keep my promises and I expect you to keep your promises. And so Saul went to the Gibeonites and said, how can we make this right? Now, these Gibeonites had been bearing this grudge, evidently, for a long time, passing it from generation to generation. And they said, well, here's what we want you to do. We want you to give us 7 sons of Saul so we can do to them what they did to us. Now, David gave them all except Mephibosheth because of his commitment to Joshua. Not to Joshua, to who was his friend? Jonathan. And they took them and they hung him up. Really, it was an Old Testament version of crucifixion. Now, when Saul died, they cut his head off. I can imagine him running around the Philistines showing the head of Saul, took his armor and put it in their temple. But not only that, they hung him and his 3 sons that died up. Depending on who you read, you can go to commentators. There's all kinds of ways that they might have accomplished that. But it was a terrible thing, and it was disrespectful, and it was bad. And so possibly they didn't actually kill them. They put them up and let them die. Let them die. And so Rizpah, a concubine of Saul. Now, we don't understand all this stuff, but here's another thing. God, for the hardness of their heart, permitted some of these things. They were not wives. They were kind of like lesser wives. Really, they were slaves. And she had these 2 boys. Unless Saul gave her authority, she had nothing to do with their raising. Maybe she did, maybe she didn't. But she can do nothing. The circumstances are out of her control. So, they put these 7 sons up. She takes sackcloth. And during the day, she keeps the predators away. She cannot take them down. So the birds of prey and the wild animals and the beast, and can't you imagine the Gibeonites going by saying, yeah, you got what's coming to you. And she'd use that sackcloth, I think, probably to shoo them away. Or be on her knees praying, or at night cover herself with a sackcloth. Isn't this an unusual story? This happened at the start of harvest. Very well could have gone on, once again, however you read this, for 4 or 5 months. This wasn't a day or 2. She was risking her own life out there protecting, in her mother's point of view, the dignity of her sons. 4 months. 4 months. I have been so stressed out about this sermon. Diane said, why are you stressed out? I said, I don't know. I am, but I feel like that's what I need to talk about. Maybe they don't need to hear it, but I think I do. We see in her what commitment is, what devotion is. We struggle in today's world to get people to, can I be blunt? Worship faithfully. Here's a mother, 4 months, maybe 5, on her hands and knees, day and terrible nights, watching her sons' bodies decay. Can you imagine? Mothers, grandmothers? Can you imagine what she was feeling? I don't think we can imagine. We might have a pretty good idea. You know, in our own lives, sometimes these terrible things happen. Now, I don't think much has happened to us that's any worse than what happened to this woman, frankly. But I watched my father as he had Alzheimer's. It's terrible to watch loved ones. And so here they are. I feel like they probably were alive at the first. My opinion. Watch them shrink, decay at her own risk. There's something about a mother's love, isn't there? You know, you go to the Hallmark store on Mother's Day, and there's aisles of Mother's Day cards, right? On Father's Day, you go, there might be 4 or 5. And they're usually jokes. That's okay. I'm not minimizing the role of fathers. But I think God made mothers special in some circumstances. I tell you, it's overwhelming. The love, I don't know what kind of mother she was for sure. I don't know what she did or didn't do, but I know she's showing nothing but love and devotion to these 2 sons. And so, the anguish. So I'm going to ask a question real quickly. I'm sure glad I'm nearsighted and I can't see that clock. I'm thrilled. But I'll try to quit on time. I think I have a few. I want to ask a question. Number 1, sons of Saul, why are you there? And they would say, our father sinned. Now, they didn't have the guilt of the sin, but the consequences of the sin. Generations. What you do, young men, those of you struggling, one of the things that can help you is if you remember you're not in this alone, that what you do impacts other people negatively or positively. Ezekiel says, I love this passage, Ezekiel 18:2. The fathers ate sour grapes, the children gnashed their teeth. What you do can impact generations, positively or negatively. Why are you there? Because of the sins of others. I've had people tell me, it's nobody's business what I do. No man lives to himself and no man dies to himself, the Apostle Paul said. So as you're here this morning and you're considering this story, I want you to remember that your actions impact others. They impact mothers, your children. Fathers, as they hear you talk about Jesus and about the church, those little ears are listening. Grandfathers, grandmothers. Sometimes we mess up. We can't change it, but we can confess it and we can talk about the lessons that we've learned. We all mess up. But don't let your children and your grandchildren, your wife or your husband, be hung out to die because of your transgressions. Sons of Saul, why are you there? Because our fathers sinned. Number 2, sons of Gibeah, why are you there? Why are you there? Revenge. All these years they carried this. You know, I was thinking as I studied about this for actually several weeks, some of the things I carry in my heart as I look at my real or maybe imagined things that people have said or done. Buddy Hackett was a comedian, and he said, I I don't hold a grudge against anybody or revenge. This is many years ago. You don't know who Buddy Hackett is. Because he said, while I'm miserable, they're out dancing. It's true. You know, you can't change what people have done for you, but you can change how you respond to it. Now, I'm not saying that's easy because, man, sometimes terrible things are done. But Paul said in Romans 12, don't be filled with vengeance. Don't be filled with vengeance. And remember, Proverbs 4:23, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. And if we let the world and all the terrible things that are going on just fill our hearts, we're going to do things that we're going to be ashamed of. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. I will repay. I don't have to worry about things being made right, do I? No, I don't. Rizpah, why are you there? Because of love for my children. Love for my children. Finally, David hears about what Rizpah is doing. He takes them down, gets Saul's bones. They burnt Saul, took his head off, but his bones were still there, and his 2 sons, and buried them all together with Saul's father near the place of his birth. Rizpah, why are you here? Why are you here? Because these are my boys. These are my boys. Love, devotion, consecration. Moms, dads, let's remember. We may talk about the influence of the world, grandmas, grandpas, the influence of the world on our children. Still, the single biggest influence is family. Is family. Sometime later, generations later, there was another mother and son with 3 crosses. We say to Mary, "Why are you here?" And she would say, "I'm sure because this is my son. Because I love him." Jesus, why are you here? Because of your sins and mine. Not his, but yours and mine. Because I love my enemies. Because you can't go to my Father unless I do this. Can you imagine, folks, can you imagine as the angels in heaven watched and God held them back? Can you imagine the Father God watching this and the anguish that he must have felt? Now we think about the anguish of Rizpah. I believe it is nothing compared to when heaven looked at its son hanging up on a cross. We cannot forget that. Church buildings are wonderful, activities are wonderful, but the power of the church is the story of Jesus Christ and God's love for us. Can I give you a quick few lessons? What time is it? I really can't see. Oh, I've got 21 minutes. 20. Lesson number 1. Life is sometimes not fair. There's those of you sitting here that life has not been fair. Now, we bring some things on ourselves, but sometimes we don't do anything, just life's not fair because the world is cursed. God said to Adam and Eve, they cursed the ground. Life's not fair because this world is cursed by sin. It's cursed by sin. Rizpah was not in control of her circumstances. She could do nothing to stop the death of her sons. So often we're not in control of our circumstances. As loved one dies, as people do things to us, as people are abused. We're not in control of our circumstances, but with God's help, we can be in control of how we respond to those circumstances and do what we can. Rizpah did what she could. Next, God's love is often expressed like a nursing mother. Is there anything sweeter in the world than seeing a loving mother nurse that child? I read in the news that they found a baby. I think they named it India just a few days ago in a plastic bag. And the mother just left it. Now, I don't know the story, but I wouldn't thought that a nursing mother could ever forget her child, but evidently they can. But God says, even if a nursing mother forgot her child, in Isaiah 49:15, I will not forget you. That means every one of you. The world may have forgot you. Others may have forgot you. Your mothers, your fathers, your friends, your neighbors, they may have forgot you. He said this to Israel, to Judah. Can you imagine what he feels toward those people that his son died for? God's on your side. I can't explain why everything happens. But here's what I know. God does not forget you. God's love is like a nursing mother's love. Then turn to Hosea, and I'll go quickly. Hosea chapter 11. This was spoken to Israel. And God was calling them home. There may be some here this morning that God needs to call home. He says in verse 1, when Israel was a child, I loved him. Out of Egypt I called my son. But the more I called Israel, the further they went from me. They sacrificed to the Baals. They burned incense to images. It was I who taught Ephraim to walk, taking them by their arms. I mean, God is comparing that. Remember when you had to let your little child hold your fingers? But if you read on, he says, I can't give you up. I can't give you up. For I am God and not man, the Holy One among you. I will not come in wrath. Now, if you keep on keeping on, God's wrath will come. But it'll be against everything that God can do to call us home. One of my favorite passages in Ephesians chapter 3. And I conclude here pretty quickly. Ephesians chapter 3, verse 17 and 18. So that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith. And I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power together with all the saints to grasp how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Christ. To know this love that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled to the measure of all the fullness of God. You look at Rizpah's love. You look at her circumstance. It fades in comparison to the love that God has for His church. Some people think they can just kind of dip in and out of the church. Paul says here, the only way we can really comprehend this love is if we do it together. Together. And we can't even begin to understand it. How long and deep and high and wide, that we may be filled with the fullness. Tonight I'm going to talk about, does the Holy Spirit dwell in you? It'll be kind of continuation of some of the thoughts. God is love. As terrible as the circumstances were, we find out that there are things worse than dying. There are things worse than dying. We tend to think, oh my, what, these people died? I tell you what's worse than dying is if we die without God. His Son died on a cross for you and me. I conclude with this. The story Rizpah tells us, if you look at it carefully, that there is judgment. Now, some of it may be in this world, some of it may be in the next world, but there is a day of accounting and judgment where all the evil things, all the terrible things, all the mean things that men and women can do will have to be accounted for if they are not covered by the blood of Jesus, because He's already accounted for those who accept Him. So I'm saying to you, if you're here and a Christian, does your love even begin to compare to the love that Rizpah had for her sons? Or the love that God has for us? Number one command, Jesus said, is what? Ask the question. Love the Lord your God with what? With all your what? With all your what? Can we commit to that? Say this with me. God is good. All the time. All the time. God is good. If we believe that, man, oh man. So you're here. You're not a Christian. You're in bad circumstances. If you die, you not only die, but you experience the second death. Christians, can you really say, I hope you can, I think you can. Well, I love the Lord my God with all my heart, with all my soul, with all my strength. If not, I'm encouraging you, in your circumstance, to make your way down this aisle, to give the elders